Thank you, Madam President. It isn't often enough that I'm able to agree with my good friend, Senator Parker, so let me begin by saying that I agree with him. Sadly, of course, we know that racism exists and discrimination exists, but I think it is probably a racist notion to suggest that only one race is capable of harboring those type of ignorant and hateful thoughts. And of course, let me say that we agree with the justification for this legislation, that there ought to be equality and justice in our community when it comes to everything, including how we treat the environment and how we place facilities that may have a negative impact on the environment. I think more than anyone in this room, I could speak to the ills that occur when it comes to discriminatorily placing facilities that affect the environment. Senator DeFrancisco was looking for a study. Senator Schneiderman said it was right in front of us. Senator Parker said that clearly you can't ignore what has occurred in this state. And so let me point out to all of you that the greatest environmental crime committed by the people of the city of New York was perpetrated against the people of Staten Island in a community that is predominantly white. And of course I speak of the Fresh Kills landfill, an unpermitted, unlined environmental disaster, more than 2,000 acres, which eventually, because of the stroke of many pens that were put down on pieces of paper by, it just so happens, Democrat elected officials, mostly in Manhattan, but throughout the rest of the city, had all of the garbage of the city of New York come to Staten Island. Now, Fresh Kills landfill was probably the worst place in the world to even site a landfill. Tribal estuaries, brackish waters, streams, wetlands, really a unique environmental area that has been decimated and destroyed over 50 years by the people outside of Staten Island who were elected in the city of New York. One of the last things that I was part of when I left the City Council was the solid waste management plan that had, because mindful of that environmental discrimination that was perpetrated against the people of Staten Island, that had one of its principles borough-based sufficiency, requiring each borough to handle its share of its waste. Part of that plan requires the placement of waste management, waste transfer stations. The first, of course, to be established happened and was established on Staten Island. We're still waiting in Manhattan. And I find it ironic that the people and elected officials in Staten Island are trying to prevent marine stations from being placed in Manhattan so that Manhattan can deal with its fair share of garbage. I am all for accomplishing what this legislation sets out to do, but as I listened to Senator Winter try to elicit how this legislation would play out, what rules would be changed, I didn't really get a satisfactory explanation. And so one of my concerns is that this legislation might do the opposite or allow, and I know that is not the intent of the sponsor. I know that. But my concern is that this might create a cause of action for everyone but the kind of community that I have in Staten Island that suffered for 50 years the environmental discrimination perpetrated upon it. And that is my concern here, is that this will allow the people of Manhattan, for instance, to prevent a transfer station from being established in Manhattan to deal with their fair share of their own garbage, which would result in this being put back on the people of Staten Island. So that's my concern. Not what this sets out to do, because I support it, but what this might actually, in practice, allow to happen. And that is the further perpetration of environmental injustice in the city of New York and elsewhere by the creation of a cause of action for some groups and not others. And so, Madam President, unfortunately, I will be voting in the negative on this legislation.